This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, here on March the 12th, 2022. And folks, I've been a wrestling fan since 1987, just before WrestleMania 3. And although I don't follow the product very much now, I do love to hop on the computer on YouTube or whatnot and look at wrestling when wrestling was great, you know? And I loved it back in the day where you could believe it, where not everything was revealed, you know? That was part of the fun. Well, folks, I remember, before WrestleMania, there was another big event called Showdown in Shea. The first one happened in 1972, the year I was born, with the main event being Bruno Samartino versus Pedro Morales, which went to a time limit draw. The second one happened in 1976, and that was Bruno Samartino versus Stan Hansen, steel cage. The final one, and the best of the three, happened in 1980, where the main event was to settle a very nasty feud between Bruno Samartino and Larry Zbyszko. Well, folks, I have Larry Zbyszko himself on Python's Paradise today. I'm so happy. Thank you, Angelo DeCipio, for setting this up. Welcome, Larry, to the show.
Well, thank you, Greg, and to all the fans out there. Thank you. And honored to still be around to do these things.
Well, I can't. How much hair color have you used on your hair to make it gray like that? I know you're what, 39?
You know what? I was dyeing my hair for like 20 years, and then finally I stopped doing it because I figured I looked like an old guy with dyed hair.
Yeah.
But so I quit dyeing it, and actually I think more hair came in since I quit dyeing it. But at least I got hair. That's
you got hair.
I'm happy with hair and teeth at 70. So you know.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, you're 20 years older than me. I'm gonna hit the big 5-0 this year,
You're still young.
Yeah, but I'm a collector, and look what I have.
Oh, Bruno doll.
Yeah, I got Bruno, the old LJN. Yeah, I was always LJN figures. Yeah, pre-posed that are rubber, but I got an articulate one too, but they're all stashed away because I'm kind of in between places here. So yeah, I don't have everything all set up the way I would like it, but
well, you'll get there.
Yep. But I've got a Bruno Samartino, and it's a very nice likeness of him. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Always.
I mean, if you look at Bruno, for his time in the age of man, I mean, Bruno was a gorilla. His wrists were like 16, 17 inches. I don't know how. Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. You mentioned Stan Hansen, went to slam him. He was slippery because sweaty, and he slipped out and he landed on his neck and broke his neck. And Bruno, the kind of man he was back in those days, in fact, he didn't really have a neck. He had like a chin and then big trapezius muscles. He was all muscle. He looked like a gorilla, He walked around for 6 months, Greg, complaining about his neck wouldn't stop hurting. So finally, Bruno went to a doctor in Pittsburgh, Dr. Symmetries, and said, gee, doc, it's been 6 months and my neck is still bothering me. So the doc took an x-ray and said, Bruno, you broke your neck. Your neck is broke. And for 6 months, he didn't know it. He just knows it bothered him.
Look, this is my tag team partner.
Oh, there you go, the cat.
Yeah, Skittles. Skittles.
Skittles.
Skittles meet Larry Zbyszko.
Sounds like a candy.
Yeah, he was named that before I got him. Skittles is like, unless he has treats. Oh, gee, Skittles. Oh, Skittles says, you're using me for hits. You're exploiting me.
Give him a treat after the show.
Oh, yeah, he gets treats too much. Oh, he's rubbing against my finger now. He's sucking up. Yeah, I heard the story about Bruno and the neck break, and I heard Stan Hansen felt really, really bad about it, and but stuff like that.
You plan to win, but you don't plan accidents.
Mm-hmm.
And back then in our day, a body slam, a suplex, those were big moves.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I mean, my God, I saw SmackDown last night and swore Biggie broke his neck. And now I hear today his neck's kind of broke and he's going to be out for some months. Because, I mean, you got fantastic, amazing athletes, and they're doing amazing stuff. But number one, it's dangerous stuff. Some of the stuff they're doing, flipping off the top turnbuckle through metal ladders and tables. But the way it's put together, it's also so pre-choreographed looking that the people really don't care,
Oh no, people don't. Yeah. I don't like what's going on with wrestling today. I don't really follow it much. I remember there was, yeah. Well, I remember there was one Christmas. My brother's wife went to visit her family, so I went over to his place on Christmas Eve, and we were eating and we were watching SmackDown. This was on a Friday night, and we couldn't even make it through 15 minutes of it. And it's like we went into the computer room, and I went on YouTube and looked up some good wrestling,
Well, I mean, it was different. I mean, like today, if you watch SmackDown or Raw, the first 15 minutes is an interview. Everything's the same. Someone comes out with a mic and stands there and talks for 10 minutes or so. And then someone else just walks out with the microphone and interrupts them. And then they start talking, and then someone else will walk out and interrupt them. I'm thinking, well, who the hell's running the show? If I was running the show, I'd say, get the hell out of there. Do a 2-3 minute interview. Don't bore the people. Say your point and get the hell out. Let's get a match going. People want to, but everything's the same.
Well, here's something else too. Every time, like, it used to be back in the day of somebody made an appearance that wasn't supposed to be planned. They would make an appearance and the crowd would cheer. Now somebody makes an appearance, you hear their theme music right there.
Yeah.
That is so phony. Another thing I don't like about today is we don't really have heel commentators. I loved it when Jesse Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon would bounce off each other, or when Bobby the Brain Heenan would, when Jesse left World Wrestling Federation, Bobby Heenan come in there, and it was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan, and eventually we had Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. I miss the heel commentary because that was part of the fun. I think John Bradshaw Lacefield would make a great heel commentator if they let him just cut loose. But
all the guys you're talking about are guys that were in the business a long time and knew the psychology and knew how to do the color man position job to make everything mean more. Today, you got guys that never even been in the business. I mean, I'm watching some show last night and I'm going, some commentator, McAfee, who's that? Did he ever wrestle? Oh, no, he never wrestled. Well, why is he there? I mean, you got other guys, that started out in NXT and broke their neck. So instead of releasing him, they made him an announcer, but he never was he was never a nobody. So you're going, who the hell's that guy? They got no credibility. They just And the announcers today talk too much, and they call it like radio. He's on the first rope, he's on the second rope, he's on the top rope, he jumped off. Well, we see that. This isn't radio. We see that. Why is he doing that? Where's the emotion behind it? What's the psychology behind it? We can see what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm wearing my Princess Victoria shirt today.
Princess Victoria.
Yeah. She's a female wrestler. She used to tag team with Velvet McIntyre.
Velvet McIntyre.
Mm-hmm.
On what, the WWE?
Yeah.
You know what? There was like 15 years or more, because when the WWE, took off and the territories died.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a lucky situation. I was between the ESPN and the AWA,
mm-hmm.
and then the NWA would need me on TBS, and then I went back and forth a couple times. But I did shows every night, and I never got a chance to watch the WWE for over 10 years or so. So there was whole careers. I mean, Cena, The Rock, The Undertaker, women. I can probably mention some others when Brock started. I never got to see them because I was always doing something else on another network. So I really missed a career of a bunch of top guys and things.
Well, you know what? You probably didn't miss anything though either, because I know you were in the WWF when Vince Sr. ran it.
Yeah.
Yep. And I loved wrestling at that time, but I'd hate to think what Vince would have done with you either. Like, they like to push who they want to push as opposed to listen to the fans. Yeah.
Well, nowadays, yeah. I mean, back then it was more for money, because back then in those days, if you didn't sell tickets, you didn't eat. So, like Vince McMahon Sr., would listen a lot to the guys. Bruno would come to Vince and say, hey, look, there's this guy over here, 300 pounds. His name's George Steele. There's a guy here, 300 pounds. His name's Ivan Koloff.
Yeah.
We got this 6'8" guy, Killer Kowalski. And Vince
McMahon, love Killer Kowalski. Yeah.
And Vince Sr. would listen and say, hey, Bruno knows who's he's going to draw money with. Okay, bring him in. Yeah, but
it was George.
Yeah. But nowadays, it's kind of like they just look at some guys and say, okay, we'll push him for a while. But the money's different, because back then you had to sell tickets. Now they're getting all television money and sponsor money and network buy, was it $5 or $10 a month, which is a hell of a deal, for pay-per-views and all the programming and stuff. But the money comes from a different place. And that's another thing with the talent too, because some of these guys come in and get a good contract. So there's no pressure on them to get better. There's no pressure on them to really learn the psychology and become the character and get that emotional connection with the fans, because they're getting paid anyway. So they just do what they're told. They don't want to get fired. Whatever you want me to run across the ring into a foot 3 times? Okay. I'll look like an idiot,
Well, I know your last name is not really Zbyszko, but I was just looking on here that your inspiration, I'm trying to pronounce this guy's name because it's looking at you on Wikipedia.
Stanislaus?
Yeah. What made him your inspiration?
Well, it wasn't Stanley. Just back in the day when I started, they drew from all kind of crowds. Bruno bridged the gap between everybody, whether you were Italians or a Polak or an English person, black, white, brown, yellow, red, whatever. They loved Bruno. Yeah. And then they had their favorites too, like Stanislaus Zbyszko wasn't their last name either. He had a brother, Wladek and Stanislaus. Okay. And that wasn't their real name either. In Polish, Zbyszko meant something, if I remember right, like the big strong one or the tough one or the, you know, kind of name. So Stanislaus Zbyszko was a famous Polish wrestler in the early 1900s and actually made a movie called Night in the City with Richard Widmark. Stanislaus was in it. He was already older then. But Bruno was the one that said, well, forget my other name, use Larry Zbyszko, because I was Polish.
Mm-hmm.
And the last name was like Wazowski, you know, something. And that was a name that still resonated in some people's minds. I used to get a lot of questions when I first started from fans that said, hey, is Stanislaus Zbyszko your grandfather? Of course he is, you know. But Bruno was the one that suggested I use that. Looked like an eye chart. No one could spell it.
Well, we need to discuss Showdown and Shea because, like I said, there were 3 of them, and you were involved in the main event in the 1981 steel cage match against Bruno Samartino. That was a huge feud. Bruno, of course, had trained you, and you guys had teamed up, and you had turned on him. They played an angle similar to that one between Hulk Hogan and Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff, which was a huge feud as well. Well, when you feuded with Bruno, you became like the most hated heel at that time. And I heard that here's one thing I heard. Outside the steel cage, Bruno apparently had never pinned you, and it was to keep you strong. Could you shed some light on that?
Well, it was kind of an interesting situation because even Vince Jr. made a comment on something. It was the feud that nobody saw coming.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, you know, in 70s, 80s, it was still the days of the territories, no nationwide TV. The wrestling show was on like at midnight or something, you know, on Channel 9 in New York City. But you know, Shea Stadium, I mean, you know, 44,000 whatever people had held in it. Really, they turned away 5,000, 6,000 people because the baseball team wouldn't let them put chairs on the infield because they didn't want the chairs to tear up all the grass.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of unheard of, you know, in those days. And the reason it happened, and no one really kind of planned it would get that big. But I was to the point where Bruno retired. He was doing the announcing with Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of stuck at, you know, I'd be in there 5, 6 years. And I was known as Bruno's protege. And even to other promoters, because all the publicity came out of New York with the magazines, you know, all over the rest of the country. And, you know, people, even the promoters would say, well, what about this guy? What's his name? Bruno's protege. So I said to myself, I got to do something that can give me a chance to become a star, you know. And I wasn't a 310-pound, you know, George Steele, but I was a good 245-pound muscular kid, kind of looked like Bruno. And because I did his workout with him for years, I benched 465 and a half pounds, weighing 245, and never took roids or none of that. That was before and all that. So I came up with this idea because I knew if anybody could get Bruno out of retirement for one more match, you know, that the place would go nuts. And whoever did it would be the next big star. So I harassed him and kind of talked him into doing something, and he saw some value in it. And then it got bigger and bigger. I mean, it got so hot, not just the Shea Stadium, which was the blow off, but for, you know, 4 months or more before that, we sold out the Garden 3 or 4 times, you know, man, Boston Garden, Philly Spectrum, Pittsburgh Civic Arena. Every huge arena in the Northeast was breaking records, you know, with me versus Bruno. So it was a gold mine, you know, for a while. And it was just something that gave me a break. And it was kind of interesting because the timing of it, if you look at the Shea Stadium and the me and Bruno feud, and then what happened like a year after, that whole Shea Stadium feud with Bruno was like the end of an old school era. It was the end of an era because right after that, within a year or so, nationwide cable started and the territories were coming to an end. So the whole business was changing into a new era. So I'm kind of proud of that because it's a historical marker of the end of the old school, and it was the beginning of nationwide, television where the territories died out. And the way it worked out for me is, and shortly after me and Bruno's feud, I worked with Morales, I wrestled Putski, but it got to the point in '81 or so where if I would have stayed there, I would have started probably getting seen too much and going down. So I took a break from the WWE, still with all my heat, people wanted to kill me. I mean, I got shot at, I got stabbed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Long story. But so I took a break and I went to Japan. Went to
Yeah.
Japan and did great there. And I came home and I actually took like 3 or 4 months off because the last couple of years were so grueling. And I had the money, so I just need to take a little time off. And during that time, things were changing. When Vince, who was the young promoter, because unfortunately, Vince Sr. passed away, and Vince wound up, but Vince was the new promoter, the young guy on the block, very sharp. I mean, Vince is an amazing guy. And he saw the new era coming with the nationwide and the territories going. So what Vince did while I was kind of gone and in hiatus, he took all the top talent from Vern Gagne, his territory. He took Hulk Hogan back, who is now a good guy, and Bobby Heenan and Mean Gene and Jesse the Body and maybe someone else from Vern's territory. And then from the Crockett's, the NWA, he took Snuka and Piper and Steamboat and maybe someone else, So all the two territories that were the other money territories, AWA and the NWA, their top talent all went to Vince because there was no contract before, but now Vince is starting and he sees the new era coming. So that gave me a kind of a break because the AWA always wanted me for a while, then the NWA wanted me for a while, then I'd go back to the AWA, then back to the NWA. So, I kind of, got caught up with a good deal because all the top talent, if I would have went to the WWE, they already had all their top guys, the Macho and the Hot Rod and the Hulk and blah, blah, blah. So it kind of worked out that way where I wound up going back and forth. And then when the territories died, the Crockett's mother, who had the purse strings, shut them and sold to Turner, which became, WCW. And then there was the two, the WWE and WCW. And then the wars were on. But it was a different era because now there were contracts. And it really turned out great for the wrestlers because in the old days, if you got hurt, you had to pay your own knee surgery. You had to sit and heal, and no one was sending you checks. You starved to death. So, but with the contracts, if you got hurt, you're taken care of. You didn't have to worry about, rehabbing with an injury, not getting paid. So it really worked out good for the boys, and, in the new era of all that contract stuff.
Well, when you did the Shea Stadium match, of course, Bruno ended up bleeding on the arm. And then eventually, as the climax of the match happened, you ended up bleeding.
That stupid cage got wires,
Oh, so that wasn't a blade job. You guys actually cut on the cage, huh?
Oh, no, yeah. Bruno caught his arm because the cage, some of the places where the metal was twisted, there'd be ends sticking out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you ran and hit the cage, or especially towards the corner of the cage, they cut you. So Bruno had his arm all cut up and my head went into one. I went, you son of a bitch. But yeah, I mean, to be a brutal cage match, there's some risks. And then And then thank God they invented this after I was done. But then guys started falling off the top of the cage through stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then it went, got worse and worse.
Well, you know what? A lot of times now, like Vince has made it so desensitized now because hardcore wrestling, I liked it. I liked it when Terry Funk did it because Terry Funk knew what he was doing. And
He was insane,
yeah, and Mick Foley was, of course, taught by Terry Funk, But there's a lot of people that take these risks, and it's like, wait, like was as you said earlier, choreographed. When Terry Funk did something, he made you believe it. I miss that out of wrestling now.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people do. I mean,
Hmm.
it's become so much the same. I watch wrestling even the other night on SmackDown with a friend of mine who's one of the coaches at the PC, and his wife, and then had a girlfriend over, and the two ladies were there. And you watch the match, the entrance comes on, they run up and back across the ring. Someone falls out of the ring and lays on the ground like they're out cold. And right away I say, dead body break, because and then the two ladies get up and go to the kitchen before the announcer says, and we'll be right back on Raw. Because every match, someone takes a bump out of the ring, lays on the ground like a dead body, and they're going to a commercial break.
Hmm.
It's just so the same every match that it really, I feel sorry for the fans because, like you said, they want to believe.
Yeah.
They want to be able to pretend. I mean, you don't want to go into a movie, and as you're going into the movie, they say, hey, so-and-so's the murderer at the end. You don't want to
Yeah.
know. You want to enjoy the thing
Yeah.
and escape reality. And I think wrestling, if they made it more like a sport and none of this stupid, every match is the same. I mean, there must be 50 clotheslines almost every show with the running under the clotheslines, and some idiot runs out of the corner across the ring into a clothesline. I mean, my God, they're all the same.
Hmm. Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me started.
Did you I don't know what the merchandise was like for you, but did you get any figurines done of yourself? Because I don't recall it.
Oh, yeah. I
Okay.
think the first ones, I think they started, or mine did, and others around 1985.
Okay.
I wish they would have had them earlier, but 1985, I was in the AWA,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I had my first action figures, and two of
Okay.
them. And then, the NWA had them, the WWF or WWE, merchants started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an interesting story with the one because when Vince took off with the nationwide, territory, ahead of everybody else, Vern and the Crockett's were working together a little bit because, the AWA guys worked with each other 50 times. I must have wrestled Bachwinkle 100 times.
Oh yeah.
And the NWA guys, Flair and Dusty must have wrestled 500 times and all those guys.
Mm-hmm.
So they were working, they were working some shows together, ran the Meadowlands and some other big shows. And then the Wrestling Dolls came out. And in the AWA, there was two guys in each pack, like a Greg Gagne and a Brunzell, or two other guys. In my action pack was me and Ric Flair. And I was in the AWA and Flair was in the NWA. So it was two guys, but we weren't the same like the AWA guys.
Mm-hmm.
And the story behind that is interesting. I'll tell you why. Good catch, good punchline. Because when the Dolls came out and the Crockett's and Gagnes were working together, Vern wanted me to do some nasty interviews on ESPN knocking Ric Flair, who was with TBS. And then Ric Flair was going to get on TBS and, badmouth me. And the AWA and other AWA guys were going to do interviews, badmouth, And then one of the shows somewhere, one of the groups was going to invade and attack the other, territory and start a big feud between the two territories. And when that doll came out of me and Flair, we were supposed to be having a big feud together. But at the last minute, the Crockett's gone, there's too many cooks, the deal fell apart, and that's when but it was too late to stop those dolls. Those dolls were already just come out, and the feud never happened. So they came out with a collector series of me and Bockwinkel in a pack of AWA dolls. But the interesting part about the story was that same idea that was supposed to happen in 1985, 1986, 10 years later was the exact same idea that became the New World Order. We made it look like the WWE guys were invading the WCW guys. It was the same idea we had before. We just, took advantage of it later down the road.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, you never did go to WWE when Vince Jr. took over. Was that a conscious decision on your part? Did you not like where wrestling was going?
No, it wasn't that. It was just like I was talking about. It was just the timing, where
Okay.
the WWE had a whole bunch of top guys, all the
Yeah.
guys. And
Okay.
because they did, I always had a great deal between the NWA for 6-8 months, and then the AWA, and then back. So I had a good deal between the two territories that needed, a hated heel guy like me, and the WWE was full of talent. So it was just kind of a thing that worked out that way. I mean, they really didn't call me, and I never needed to call them because I was always in need on one of the two territories, and maybe go to Japan for a month here and there. And so it just kind of worked out that way where, and then WCW happened, and I wound up with a big contract as an employee. That was a time when Ted Turner was giving money away like he was printing it out of the basement, Unbelievable.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to talk about some of the guys that you wrestled, but I mean, I know when you were after your big feud with Bruno, there were some managers that wanted to manage you, like, Classy Freddie Blassie and
Albano and
yep,
Grand
Captain Lou
Wizard.
Albano, Grand Wizard. But you went solo. It's interesting because a lot of times managers are really good on the mic. Not everybody needs a manager because some people are naturally good on the mic. Was that your feeling that you were able to do your own talking and able to generate heat without that extra support?
Yeah, you know what? That was really it, because a lot of guys, like take George Steele, who was running them like a nut, or some other guys. The manager was there because they could all talk good.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was blessed with the gift of gab, and because I was taught the psychology by the old school, I could talk great. I was just lucky, and I could do great interviews. But I knew the psychology, and if you look even into the mid 80s and stuff, when I'm doing shows and interviews, I could walk out to the ring and people would chant "Larry sucks" for 10 minutes without me doing anything, But it was because when I got done talking and walking on TV, the fans, no matter what they thought of wrestling, because they were already starting the dirt sheets and the blah, blah, blah. But people believed in real life that I was a real asshole. And I had them convinced by the way I moved, talked, and then because the way I did interviews, that they believed in person. Forget the wrestling. This guy is an asshole. So that's where, the psychology paid off. So I was a good talker, but people believed in me, not maybe in wrestling, but they believed I was a real a-hole in real life.
I watched some of your matches last night in preparation for this, and I like what you did. I watched you in the match with Sergeant Slaughter.
Oh yeah.
And you spent more time on the outside of the ring telling fans to shut up and this and that. I loved it, and
God, yeah.
you knew how to do that. I know there was one. I'm trying to think who it was. Who was you? Oh, you were against Barry Windham, and you're outside. You took there's a couple of women there, and you took their little Windham side and tore it up.
People wanted to hate me. I'd be walking down the aisle to the ring, and a little kid would hand me their, stick out their autograph book, and I'd take it from the kid, rip it in half, and throw it up in the air, because that's what an a-hole would do.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when I was doing some stuff at TNA and Impact, like when AJ Styles first started, and Chris Daniels and The Abyss and some others,
Mm-hmm.
ESPN was showing old reruns on TV.
Mm-hmm.
These young guys were the first time they saw me, and they'd run up to me backstage, AJ and them, and say, "How could you do stuff like that? How could you be such an a-hole?"
Mm-hmm.
Get it, back then, if we didn't sell tickets, we didn't eat.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you, Ric Flair and Roddy Piper knew how to do that too. Like when, like a lot of people credit Vince McMahon with WrestleMania, but had it not been for Captain Lou Albano's association with Cyndi Lauper, how would that have been steered into that? Because Lou Albano, what led to the Rock and Wrestling's angle, and of course Roddy Piper became the big heel. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yep. But Piper would do some stuff against Cyndi Lauper and against Mr. T, where they brought in, and Piper knew how to get heat. It's like they're afraid to do that now.
I know. I mean, I don't know if it's all this politically correct crap.
Yeah.
Before we had Chief Jay Strongbow, Chief, Wahoo McDaniels, and they'd be in the ring with their feathers and stuff. And now it's like, you never see an Indian, on TV wrestling, because does that offend Indians? Baseball teams got to change their name from the Redskins to the something, because
give me a break.
The Braves, which is a compliment to the ancient Indian tribes, but I don't know if it's the politically correct stuff. I remember WCW, we had a guy, Buddy Lee Parker,
Mm-hmm.
a guy, but not super big, so they made him a leprechaun. And for a couple months, he'd be running around the ring in the green, and he was, the leprechaun is out here. Well, TBS got a threatening letter to get sued by the Association of Leprechaun Lovers or something. So they canceled the leprechaun. And how the hell can you cancel a leprechaun when there's no such thing, but you can't be a leprechaun on TV? So I think some of this politically correct crap, is getting in the way of some things. It's just the world's going off a cliff. I'm glad I'm the age I am.
Yeah.
I lived the life you can't live anymore, really. Get in the airplane. Would you like smoking or non-smoking? Not smoking, thank you. Thank you. It's freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to mention some of the guys that you would have been in the ring with. One guy I want to mention, I think he's one of the best talents in the ring. This guy's always fun to watch. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Oh, Ricky. I mean, again, talk about, cliche. Ricky looked the part.
Mm-hmm.
He looked like, a Bruce Lee kind of guy in those days.
Yeah.
And Ricky was smart enough to know how to handle himself in the ring. I mean, if you were Ricky Steamboat and some guy came by and he hit you with a chop or something, like a Japanese guy would give you a chop and you'd fall down, people would believe it because you're Japanese or you look like Ricky. If I did it, it wouldn't make any sense because I was a Polak. I'm not an Indian. I can't tomahawk chop somebody. It made no sense.
Mm-hmm.
But Ricky knew how to work what his character looked like so that people could get into it easy. Now, Ricky was, yeah, they were all good. Ricky was good. Piper was insane, but, good, knew the psychology. Those old school guys knew the psychology of how to get their character, into the people's minds. Nowadays, everybody's the same. They all dance down the aisle doing the entrance.
Yeah.
They stand there for 10 minutes during the commercial. And then the other guy dances down, does their entrance. And then they ring the bell and they punch kick, punch kick. One guy last night punched some guy in the face like 8 or 9 times, then kicked him in the stomach when he fell down like 10 times, and then picked him up and threw him into the other corner. And the guy reversed him. He just got punched out 15 times, but no big deal. He just reversed the guy to beat him up and then leapfrogged them, and like nothing happened. So they don't get it. They don't get it.
Would you say Bruno was the toughest guy you were in the ring with, or was there tougher?
You know what? Bruno was an exceptionally tough man. I mean, there were some guys around that would be classified as better wrestlers. I mean, like some hookers and shooters like Carl Gotch or Billy or some other guys that taught me, that Bruno introduced me to from Wigan, England. But Bruno knew enough. I mean, front face, like, he could break your neck, break your arm. But the thing about Bruno was he was so strong. I mean, he was a gorilla. So you couldn't really do much to hurt him.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have to know a lot. I mean, if you dove Bruno and grabbed his legs and took him down, he would just put his arms around your head and neck and, you're out. So he didn't know a lot, but he knew enough, and he was so ridiculous. It's like wrestling a gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you couldn't hurt him anywhere, really. He was just so ridiculously strong and thick. Yeah, amazing man.
Unfortunately, his son David didn't have the same kind of success, but you were in the ring with David a few times too. Talk about working with David in comparison to Bruno.
Well, David was actually a little different to work with because he was smaller, and we could I had some great matches with David.
Yeah.
But David, mentally got so frustrated and depressed. And it wasn't his fault because,
No.
I mean, he didn't look like his dad. If he would have looked like his dad or been a little bigger than his dad, But David couldn't fill Bruno's boots. He wasn't as big. He didn't have the look. And he shouldn't feel bad because nobody could have filled Bruno's boots at that time. He was just that ridiculous for that time.
And to be frank, there was nothing wrong with David either. I always felt WrestleMania 1, they had the match between David Samartino and Brutus Beefcake. And of course, David had Bruno in his corner, and Beefcake had Johnny Valiant in his corner. And it ended up being a double disqualification because Valiant interfered and Bruno went in there and fought him and whatnot. And I was like, had Vince been smart, he would have booked that as a tag team match and given the victory to Bruno and David, as opposed to going to a double DQ. Book it for the crowd. Bruno was on the outside of the ring and he got one of the biggest pops of the night.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, put him in the ring with David. That would have been a great father-son tag team match,
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know about that. I was already other places,
Yeah.
But I never saw any of the early WrestleManias. The first WrestleMania I was ever at was in 2013 when they inducted Bruno in the Hall of Fame. And I'm kind of the main guy that hooked that up because Bruno didn't want to go, but then I talked him into it. And he checked out some things and realized, hey, WWE became a great company. And he was proud to go in. So.
Yeah. My favorite WrestleMania was always WrestleMania 3. That to me
I don't know anything about that.
That was where Steamboat versus Savage happened, which was a great match,
Yeah. So I was always with the other guys,
Yeah.
So I never saw any wrestling of anybody else because every night I was doing a show somewhere.
Well, I know you did. You were part of the Enforcers, which was kind of like a take on the Four Horsemen, where you worked with a tag team with Arn Anderson.
Darn.
Yeah, Arn was a terrific wrestler. Talk about that dynamic.
Well, it's interesting because Arn was great. I mean, I was never in the Four Horsemen,
Hmm.
and I never wanted to be in a group because I had so much heat on me. I wanted to be a top guy and make more money and single, guy. So, but then I was getting like, in WCW, I was like 40 years old, 41 years old. Had a couple of Mickey Mouse knee scopes with some torn cartilage, but nothing bad. So when I went there and they tagged me and Arn up, uh, that was great because Arn was a great tag team partner, fun to travel with. We had a great time. And the people, part I liked was the people bought it. When me and Arn walked out into an arena in front of a crowd, it felt like you were back in the 70s and 80s instead of the early 90s because the crowd would go, whoa! I mean, they bought me and Arn. Me and Arn clicked.
Hmm.
Enforcers was good. It could have lasted a little longer, but then Bill Watts came into WCW and screwed everything up. He was a moron.
Yes.
But,
Yeah, I've heard that story.
and the interesting thing is, I mean, I like being the Enforcers were great, and that
Hmm.
was great. But when they made the Dangerous Alliance, they had me and Arn and Stunning Steve Austin, Bobby Eaton, and Rick Rude with Paulie running around. I didn't want to be part of a group. I
Hmm.
was like 42 years old, maybe now. And I said, God, I don't want to be part of a group. And as I hate Bill Watts, because his idea was everybody over 40 should just get beat, and Eric Watts should have the belt, his kid.
Hmm.
So I said to the TBS people, "Oh, my knee hurts." So I got another little knee scope to get some cartilage cleared out. And I had a couple of months off. I was rehabbing. I was home floating in the pool. And I get a phone call from one of the TBS producers that says, "Hey, Larry, can you come down and do us a favor? Because Jesse the Body just quit. And we wonder if you can do a couple of voiceovers on some syndicated shows we have, for the syndicated market. There are already shows made up, but no voiceovers on them."
Okay.
So I said, "Yeah, I'll come down and voice over them." So I went down and maybe me and JR or me and Tony voiced them over. And we did a few shows. And the door busts open, and the executive producer runs in, this guy named Craig, and he goes, "You're the best color guy we've ever heard. Do you want to do the color for us? We'll give you this much a year." And I almost fell off the chair. It was more than twice I was making wrestling, and that was the time when Turner was, giving big contracts away like nothing. And Ole used to pull his hair out because he'd go, "Why are you giving these new guys all these big contracts?" And the TBS, business guy said, "Hey, Ted Turner gave us all this money to give away. And if we don't give this money away, he won't think we're doing our jobs." So there was a whole bunch of guys lucking out, making 400 or 500 grand a year. As an employee, got the benefits. So for 10 years, it really gave me a really cool part of the business to where my body at 41, 42 didn't get abused. I mean, right now my health is great. I don't need surgeries. I feel great. But that 10 years saved my body, made me money, and gave me a connection to a couple of new generation of younger fans that wouldn't have known me because guys my age at that time were starting to fade away. They were either burnt out or they were hurt, or they were dead, not too many guys. So that was really kind of, so I never planned on doing the broadcasting.
Hmm.
It just was meant to be.
Talk about doing war games. Of course, you ended up making a mistake that cost your team the win.
Did I?
Yeah. Oh yeah, there it was you and a lot the people that you had mentioned there, and I'm trying to think who it was that you accidentally hit. Was Stan Lane? It might have been, but you guys were all in this cage, and um, one guy goes in like every 2 minutes or something like that, depending on a coin toss, and you were on one team, and
Yeah, I'm glad that. I mean, I to tell you the truth, I don't remember that except I remember one time I was in there. I think Sid Vicious was in and Brian Pillman was in, and
mhm.
Sid was so tall he tried to pick Pillman up, but Pillman hit the top of the cage and couldn't do it. But that stuff that started, with all these cages and elimination chambers and all that all kind of started right at the time when I said, "Oh, my knee hurts." So then
Yeah.
I did the broadcasting, and it got more and more, but I really don't remember too much of that. And then I wasn't involved in the 90s as it was going on. And then in 97, that same idea from the AWA years ago, I'm the one that put together the New World Order, the way
Uh-huh.
things were programmed to happen. And then someone told me Bischoff on his podcast a little while ago admitted that he got the name from me because I was doing the interviews going, there's going to be a new world order. And he liked that and took it. But I played an important role in the beginning of that whole new world order. And that's the important part. If you're going to do something or push, a guy, you got to do it right from the beginning. And then you'll get the most out of him. If you do it wrong at the beginning and say, wait, let's change his name and make him someone else, it's too late. It don't work.
Talk about wrestling Bischoff. Angelo said one thing you gotta ask Larry is about wrestling Eric Bischoff.
Well, you know what? I mean, Bischoff and me was kind of a match like a Bruno and me. And in fact, me and Bischoff and me and Scott Hall were the two biggest buy rates WCW ever did.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bischoff, he did a great job as being a bad guy. I mean, people hated him. They believed he was an a-hole. Eric did a great job. And even in the late 90s, when everybody, thought they knew everything, there was people throwing stuff in the ring. They were jumping over the security rail trying to punch Bischoff out and all that and all that stuff. And yeah, but he did a great job with it. And in the ring, but it was big because it was the kind of match that's rare. It's that I call it a novelty match. Like when me and Bruno did it, it was kind of a novelty because Bruno was retired. He came out of retirement. And this was a novelty match where Eric was the head of the company and I was a broadcaster. So it was like a once in a lifetime thing. You got to see this because this is the only time it's going to ever be seen. Mm-hmm. So it was a novelty match that really got over, and Eric did a great job. He was very hateable.
Well, you mentioned the crowds, and I know that when you and Bruno had your feud, as I mentioned, you were one of the most hated heels. I'd read up that you had some attacks where people would try to overturn your car or vandalism, and you get stabbed in the butt.
In the butt.
Oh my goodness. Like that, that's a lifestyle of a wrestler I wouldn't want if it was me, having to look over. It was crazy back then. Talk about that fear of going out to your vehicle or
well, here's the deal. I mean, it happened before me too. I mean, Freddie Blassie walked out one time in the Boston Garden. People were throwing eggs at him, and one egg hit him in the eye and exploded, and he lost an eye.
Oh.
Bobby Heenan was shot at when he was in the ring in the Chicago amphitheater. Someone in the ring shot, took a shot at him. But I didn't realize how much I'd be hated. The first time after the TV showed about me, turning on Bruno,
mm-hmm.
I drove my new Cadillac, just about new Cadillac, to some town. I came out and my car was keyed and the windows were smashed and the mirrors were hanging. And I had to have one guy help me, put a new tire on because one, was flattened. And I'm driving down the highway on the way home with this new Cadillac that looked like I was in a wreck. I went, oh my God. And then I went to another show, but then I used to have to hide in people's trunks because I walked out of Albany one time, shortly a week after or so. I opened the door and came out, and the fans would be waiting. And all of a sudden I hear boom. And the bricks above my head, you could feel shattering pieces of brick hit me because someone took a shot above the door and scared the shit out of me. I ran back in the building. But, and then the one time a riot inside the arenas, I was trying to make my way to the dressing room. Guys were hitting me, I was hitting them. And then it felt like someone kicked me in the butt really hard. And I went through and I made it to the dressing room with the police around me and they're slapjacking people. I mean, we had a riot almost every night.
Mm-hmm.
And I get into the dressing room and there's Arnold Skull and he's playing cribbage with Andre. And he goes, hey, it sounded good. How'd it go? And I went, well, they went berserk, another riot. I said, boy, some guy kicked me in the butt pretty good. And I put my hand back here and I went, what the hell is this? And I pull out a blade about this long. It was one of them skinny long blades from them wooden knives that would go into the handle.
Yeah.
Wooden knife. So someone stabbed me in the ass, and when I turned around to hit him, I broke the blade off in my butt.
Oh.
And then I'm going down the road one time, and there's 4 or 5 guys in a car trying to run me off the road. I'm going, what the hell? So I pulled out the 45, boom, and I shot it over the roof of their car, and they took off. I carried a gun, brother.
Well, you could say that other incident, that was a real pain in the ass.
Yes, it was. And the worst part was I had to go get a tetanus shot.
Yeah.
Because you know what the old people would do when they were nasty was they would take a knife and stick it in a piece of meat for a few days and then take it out and put it in the sheath so that meat would rot and get germs. And if someone stabbed you or cut you with that blade with the rotten, meat and all over it, you'd get a hell of an infection.
Mm-hmm.
That was nasty stuff going on. Yeah.
You mentioned Andre. I don't recall this, but were you ever in the ring with him?
I was in the ring with him a couple of times as his partner.
Okay.
I never wrestled Andre, thank God. But I was his partner a couple of times. Yeah.
Well, I've had Roddy Piper's son and daughter, Colt and Ariel, on here, and I'm still in touch with Ariel. She wrestles as Teal Piper, but that they were telling stories about how well Andre got along with Roddy Piper. And they said Andre used to do something where he would kind of sit down in the corner and Piper would just unload on him. And they just kind of had that kind of a communication, If Andre liked you, he really worked with you,
Oh, yeah. You didn't want him to not like him. I tagged with him a couple of times, and then I was on some tours of Japan with Andre. Me and Andre would sit there and play cribbage on the bullet train and take on. And he was a great guy. Andre was a great guy. But I only teamed with him a couple of times and was in Japan with him. But see, Andre was an attraction.
Yeah.
So he'd be in the WWE for 2 or 3 months, and then he'd be in the NWA, and Vince Sr. would kind of rent him out, and he'd go to this territory and that territory. And I remember one time Bruno was telling me Vince Sr. was kind of complaining, going, God, I'm trying to get Andre rented out, but the guys said they just had him 4 months ago. So he was more of an attraction that was rented out all over.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a great guy, Andre, a great guy.
You mentioned Japan. I love Japan wrestling, and I think a lot of times, like I even see Hulk Hogan, I think wrestled better in Japan. I think Japan brought out the best in everybody.
Probably had to. When you went to Japan, they told you, lay it in. They wanted you to beat the crap out of them, and in return, you could get the crap beat out of you too. They wanted it tough. And the thing I liked was the pachinko. I played pachinko all day, the little gambling with the balls.
Yeah.
Little games they had. But the Japanese wanted it to be hard. They wanted you to lay it in. In fact, me and Masa Saito, the day before the Buster Douglas fight, had a match in the Tokyo Dome in front of 72,000 people, sold out the Tokyo Dome. the day before the Buster Mike Tyson fight.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was a thrill, and Saito was good. He was good. They were tough.
Did you ever wrestle Antonio Inoki?
I'm trying to think. I don't believe so. I remember I wrestled Jumbo Teruta
Mm-hmm.
when I was there, and some other guys. But I really don't recall like an Inoki. That would have been probably a main event or something. I really don't recall an Inoki thing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Nope.
I mean, I didn't go there a whole lot, but
Oh, I know he was a big player in Japan, so
oh yeah, him and
yeah.
Baba were the two big things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll go throw some names that you talk about being in the ring. Sergeant Slaughter, talk about wrestling him.
Oh, me and Sargent, we had some great matches, and again, talk about a character that got over because he looked the part. You could
Mm-hmm.
believe he was Sergeant Slaughter. He had that chin,
Yep.
but then he knew how to walk like a sergeant and talk like a sergeant. And he was the character. And I remember one time me and him had a match in Chicago. Hell of a match. We came back and Bockwinkel came up to me and said, Larry, that was one of the greatest matches I've ever seen. I mean, talk about a good compliment. But no, Sarge was great. He knew how to be the character. He looked the character. And that's what these guys don't know today. I mean, how to be a character of what you look like that the people can get involved with, and get into you.
Mm-hmm.
You got guys out there 350 pounds and they're wrestling like they're 200 and they're wrestling like a 180-pound guy, and then they break their neck because they can't really do all that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. You mentioned Nick Bockwinkel. Talk about being in the ring with him.
Well, he was an old smoothie. I mean, when I
Uh-huh.
got there, he was already a well-seasoned pro, and being in the ring with Nick was, we would call it like a night off because
Mm-hmm.
he was just so smooth, and for the style back then, easy to get the crowd going, and I mean, yeah, he was great.
It's funny. I've heard the same thing being described of Jake the Snake Roberts. People said not only they liked working with me, it was like a night off,
A night off was like an expression. Yeah, the guy was good.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's always good. And of course, we mentioned Bruno, but another champion, Pedro Morales. You were in the ring with him.
Yeah, I wrestled Pedro a little bit after the Bruno thing, and
Mm-hmm.
again, those guys from that era, Morales and Butsky and Strongbow and some other, they all knew the secret psychology of the business
Mm-hmm.
because you had to. Because if you didn't sell tickets, you didn't eat. It was that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want new guys in the business. I mean, today there's wrestling schools like in every city, indie shows everywhere. Back then, there was no schools. You weren't getting into business. I mean, you take some guy like who looks like some 190-pound guy with arms the size of my wrists, like half the guys on TV, knock on a promoter's door and say, "I want to be a wrestler." And they go, "Get the heck!" They'd slam the door in your face. Yeah, they wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't even get in. And if you bothered the promoter too much and annoyed him, they'd say, "Okay, show up a couple hours before the show tomorrow, and we'll put you in the ring with one of the old guys and see what you got." So the guy would show up, and they'd tell him, "Yeah, he'll get in the ring and wrestle this guy. His name's Carl Gotch. See what and see if you can handle this older guy."
Mm-hmm.
And Carl Gotch in 30 seconds or so would break his arm or break his wrist or pop his knee out or break his ankle, And then the guy would go, "Oh my God!" But that was good business to them because the guy would go back to his neighborhood and say, "Oh my God, these guys are real. Look, he broke my arm." But they wouldn't let you in the business because they needed you to buy tickets.
Yep. Yep. And of course, when I was gonna say you were in the ring with Ivan Putski. You were in with a lot of the classic individuals, the people I like to watch on YouTube. Do you remember? your last, well, you remember your last match before you officially left?
The WWE?
Any wrestling period.
Oh, wrestling period. Oh God. I mean, I really don't remember the very last match. I might have done a couple little, small shows because I got one kid named Tim who wanted to try wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I did a couple tag matches with him, but I was basically done. I basically just stood on the corner, and let him try it. But that was probably the last matches I have. I mean, I haven't been in the ring in, got 10 years, and I have no plans on ever getting in the ring.
Oh, come on. You look like you could do it.
I mean, I'm more lethal than I look, and I can stand there. And if some guy does the wrong thing, I know how to break your arm, your neck, your wrist, your knee, all that. But I'm not running around, jumping, climbing up to the top rope, or none of that.
Well, you've
So if
been
someone wants to give me a $500,000 or like Brock $1,000,000 a match, I'll stand there and put someone in the sleeper.
well, you've been in cage matches. What's the most unusual match you've ever been in?
Oh God. Oh God. I'm thinking quick. I hate to waste time, but probably that one you mentioned with the
The war
cage
game?
thing. Yeah, the
Yeah.
war games when that was probably like the weirdest because right after that I got out of the wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the broadcasting, and then it went from there to more and more. But that was probably the weirdest thing because I was an old school guy. I was raised by the old school and still believed in the man on man or a good tag team.
Mm-hmm.
But all this new stuff started coming, and then after I got out of the ring, I'm hearing stuff about ECW where people are hitting each other with baseball bats with barbed wire and dropping them through tables set on fire, and
Mm-hmm.
no one's getting paid, and it just got so stupid. I even made a joke about it. I said, well, they've done everything else. The only match they can have now is loser lights himself on fire. And sure
Man.
enough, like 4 or 5 months ago, the Fiend got lit on fire. He disappeared, so they got rid of him.
I don't understand that either because they could have really done something with him. They just did a real injustice with this guy.
I mean, to me, the whole thing with the dolls and the
Yeah.
Fiends, to me, that's stupid. Am I
Yeah.
watching a game show or what am I watching? This isn't
You're
a
watching Vince
event, is it?
McMahon make a mockery of the business. That's what
I
you're
didn't know
seeing.
what I was watching. I mean, I went, yeah, I couldn't take that.
Vince likes to call it sports entertainment. No, let's call it wrestling.
Yeah, if you're talking to puppets, it's nothing to do with a sport and it's not entertaining. It's dumb.
Like I
I don't
remember
get it.
back in the day, like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, they had you in the palm of their hand through their back and forth interviews. By the time they
Yeah.
got to the ring, you were invested. Or the feuds today, you can't even get invested. I remember Jimmy Snuka and Roddy Piper, they had a feud that went a year.
Oh yeah, with the coconut on their head, but
Yeah.
they built things up. I know what you mean. Yeah, don't get me started.
You don't get that today. It's just they run out of ideas quick,
I mean, sometimes me and a couple of my buddies will say the same thing, and then on the other side of the coin, we're saying, "Well, shit, the guy who doesn't know anything's making $3 million this year with a contract. So what the hell do we know?"
Yeah. Was there ever anybody you were in the ring with that you didn't gel with where somebody might try to shoot on you, as they say?
No, no, you know what?
No?
I never had that problem, but the era I came from, I was kind of like one of the young guys of the old school, and people
Hmm.
knew me, and no one would mess with me because I knew I could hurt them. I mean, I was a real guy. I
Well, you
was.
wrestled some of the top guys. Was there anybody that you would have liked to have wrestled that you never received the opportunity?
Well, I tell you what. I mean, the time that me and Ric Flair dog came out, I was excited because I knew, with Flair and me, we could have had a hell of a match and a hell of a series, of
Hmm.
matches around. So the me and Flair would have been great. I never had a chance to work with the Hulk. I think me and the Hulk could have had some great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there might have been a couple other ones. I don't think I ever worked with Piper.
Love Roddy Piper.
Yeah, Snook a little bit, but really Flair and the Hulk were probably the two guys I never worked with that would have been really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about being part of the Gagne family.
Oh well, well that worked out. That worked out good because Kathy was very sweet and we had a lot in common because she wasn't like a fan. She was raised in the business.
Was she tougher than they were?
Tougher.
Was she tougher than Greg and Vern?
Well, I mean, I don't argue with her, but it was funny because the one thing, kind of a stereotypical line, and you don't want your daughter marrying a wrestler, you're never home anyway. And it was funny because me and Kathy were sneaking around for a while together. And one time we went to a Bob Seger concert in Minnesota. And at the
Okay.
end, the lights went on. And who's sitting right behind us is Greg, her brother, with some people. So we look back and he's looking at us and we go, oh, shoot. So the next day I get a call. Hey, Vern would like you to come to the office and have a talk with you, right?
Ooh.
So I go, oh, damn. So, okay. So I drive to the office and I'm going to throw him off as soon as I get psychology. I'm throwing him off. So the secretary opens the door and I walk in and Vern's sitting at his desk and he looks at me, he goes, and as soon as he starts to get up, I go, Dad. And he went, but it worked out great. It really did work out great. Vern was a good guy, great father-in-law, and great grandfather to the kids. It worked out great.
Love that.
Dad.
I bet that was a long drive to that office,
A
but
lot
you
of
had
thinking on the way over there.
I bet you were.
Shotgun wedding. What the hell's going on here? But we flew out to Vegas, and that time Kathy was already 6 months pregnant. We got married. She's wearing a red dress with a big stomach with the baby in it. And Vern was there, my dad. It was good. Our honeymoon was she went to sleep and I went down to gamble.
Well, you mentioned Ric Flair. Charlotte Flair, his daughter, I think is one of the best right now working. I love what I'm seeing. Love what I see out of her. What do you think of intergender matches?
I just don't think they're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, men wrestle men, women wrestle women. I'm just old fashioned, but the whole intergender thing, I mean, okay, so if a guy's with a guy, but then the girl tags and everything's got to stop and now the guy's got to go and tag his partner who's a girl in. To me, it's no. I don't like it.
Yeah,
it's the old school in me,
Yeah, I've seen some like Jim Cornette is in the same vein with that. He said there was situations like, if he wrestled Baby Doll, but he said, but he's a manager. Of course he's gonna lose,
He wasn't a wrestler. He was a skinny manager with the thing. Baby Doll was a good sized woman.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they made that work. But a lot of times today it can hurt the talent and hurt the talent badly. So
I just don't get it now. I mean, you got women out there that are amazing athletes. I mean, they're amazing. Some of these women they got there. And then they move just as good, if not better, than some of the guys. I mean, and they're doing the same kind of stuff that they're doing, flipping, bending, but Charlotte does a great job with it.
Well, I remember Wendy Richter had done cage matches back in the day, so she was definitely legitimately tough. I guarantee, I know Ronda Rousey could probably do well against any of these guys, save for maybe Brock, but it's hard seeing a male female compete against each other. And
that's not right.
Because seeing them wrestle, and then it was awkward. I watched a match between Eddie Guerrero and China, whom I know respected each other, but watching Guerrero had to resort to hitting her, and it must have been awkward in the ring for both of them, you know?
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. The only thing about, China was twice Eddie's size, and her gimmick was the big strong thing, but all you did basically was bury Eddie. You couldn't beat the woman.
Yeah. Well,
I never saw any of that. So.
Eddie turned out all right though until his unfortunate passing. He did
Yeah,
well.
that's
Yep.
young guy.
Yeah. Is there anybody that post retirement that back in the day you would have liked to have been in the ring with?
I mean, guys that were already done.
No, like guys that came after you, like Bret Hart, for example, said he would have loved to wrestle Kurt Angle. He thinks he would have been able to have a good match with Kurt Angle. Who do you think you would?
I wrestled Kurt Angle, and I mean not Kurt Angle, but I'm losing my brain here. Senior moment. Hennig. I wrestled Kurt Hennig.
Yep.
And them, but I'm thinking. I don't know. I kind of wrestled everybody that I would have liked to wrestle when I did the broadcasting. A new generation was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Guerrero and the Benoit and this guy and other guys. But I wasn't even thinking of wrestling them. I just wanted to be done with the broadcasting and run to the golf course or the casino. So I really don't know. You know what? I signed a deal to do a new television show. And it's going to be on some streaming thing. And I have no idea what streaming is. It's going to be on Peacock or Tubi or something. And it's going to be called, I think, The Legends of Wrestling. And there's this TV show company that's got right now over 3,000 hours of old matches from the late 50s, 60s, 70s, stuff no one else owns, and they're leaving the original commentating on the matches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to host a show, do something high at the beginning, when they're great in the middle. And next week we got Gorgeous George. Can't wait to see you. It's a simple ins and outs of things. And I'm looking forward to it because it's going to be so different because today's production's awesome. I mean, the production's awesome with the lights and the cakes and the pyro. But in the old days, all you had was a ring with one light bulb above the ring, and half the, arena was smoky because half the people are smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting because they could have some names like Gorgeous George and Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher and Vernon Luthez and Buddy Rogers. And so we're going to film it. And I think in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do the first couple of shows. And I'm going to call it The Legends of Wrestling. It's going to be on some streaming thing, but it should be interesting.
I would watch
something. It's so night and day from today.
I would watch something like that. Absolutely. Get some great names in there from the past. And absolutely. I noticed too, a lot of the older, like your Brunos and your Killer Kowalskis, they're part of the rare breed that make it over 80 years old. And a lot of wrestlers today they're passing young,
Yeah, there's too many of them. And unfortunately, they just got into a generation where things popped up. I mean, some of the guys too much steroids, which people didn't realize, in 10 years down the road, your heart's going to be, twice as big as it should because your heart's a muscle and it enlarges and growth hormone. They just overdid it, some guys, and, alcohol. I never drank my whole adult life. I think alcohol should be illegal, to be honest with you. Makes people stupid, but it was just it's too bad. But the good thing about the WWE 2 years ago, they put their foot down to all that crap. No roids, no growth hormones. You're doing drugs. If you got a problem, they'll put you to rehab 10 times if you need it, but they won't tolerate it. So, God bless them.
Well, you wrestled superstar Billy Graham. I also noticed on your Wikipedia you wrestled Abdullah the Butcher.
Well, a
Did you
couple
have it?
times. It's
Did you have
rare.
it? Yeah. Did you have any reservations about wrestling Abdullah? Because I know he's common with using the fork on his opponents.
Oh God, he had scars so deep in his
Oh
head, he had
yeah.
a quarter in it that would hold it. But I knew Larry. His name was Larry
Yeah.
Abdullah, and he was a character. And I
Mhm.
might have wrestled him once or twice, but when with him, I would do it completely different. And
Okay.
I wouldn't do, the fork and the eye and that. Me and Billy Graham had just maybe a couple matches, not many.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be doing something and hooking Billy, and Billy didn't want to go too long, so he'd go, "Let's end this. I'll take all responsibility." Okay. So,
Bob
but
Backlund would go a long time though.
yeah, Bob, it was too bad because Bob, kind of got like a bad gimmick because he couldn't fill Bruno's boots either. And they kind of tried to push him down people's throats at the wrong time because he just didn't look the part that Bruno, people called him Howdy Doody. But in reality, Bob was a super athlete. He was
I
a great
agree.
wrestler, nice guy, but he was just at the wrong time, pushed in the wrong place, and people, not just Bob, but couldn't fill Bruno's shoes.
Bruno
He
had a
just,
hard time leaving. Retired in '81. He tried to uh, not come back, but come in there, help his son break in, and they kept luring him back. They had him in there feuding with Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, the Honky Tonk Man. Finally, I think it was '87. He finally was able to get out of there. Period, But Bruno had a hard time getting out.
well, yeah, I guess I really don't remember too much of that, other than I think Bruno stuck around longer than he wanted to because that way Vince would give his kid a shot.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't do that, Vince would have no interest in his kid.
Do you
So I think
think?
he did that for a while.
Do you think David was given an unfair shot?
Not an unfair shot. It was just, it was just. I think Dave expected more, but he just couldn't fill the shoes. And it
Yeah.
just got to him, and then even David, I think, tried to puff up because I'd see him one time, he's maybe 220. And next time I saw him, he's 250, but all bloated. So he's all Diana balled up. And that got
Yeah.
Bruno mad, because Bruno was dead set against all that crap.
Well, I've been trying to get somebody from Bruno's family on here, and I think on Facebook, I think they're going to try to set me up with Daryl Sammartino. So,
Daryl's the only one left. His brother Danny, they're twins. He died.
oh,
And shortly after Bruno died. It's sad.
yeah. Well, before we close off, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is the conventions. Conventions, it started with Comic Con. Now you got conventions for so many things, and wrestling conventions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What's the most unique thing you've ever been asked to sign?
Well, the most unique thing I was ever asked to sign really is stupid, but after everything, we got from 8x10s to cars to figures to whatever, video games, a whole bit. One time I was at a convention and I was there, hour and a half or so, and I thought, let me just take a 5-minute break to stretch out. And I went out the back door and had a cigarette.
Uh-huh.
So I had a cigarette and I threw the butt down the street and came back in and sat down. A few minutes later, some guy comes up with a baggie, and inside the baggie was my cigarette butt that he saw me smoking outside and picked up and said, "Can you autograph your cigarette butt?" I've autographed some real butts, but so I guess the cigarette butt autograph was the weirdest, thing I've ever autographed.
Oh my goodness, that is funny.
I don't smoke anymore. That was years ago.
Well, yeah, because if you smoke now, you'd be asked to sign a lot of those.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't recommend it, but it was just a different day. Everybody kind of smoked, and I flew little planes, private pilot, and it was just like, all right, I'm set. I'll be there in an hour and a half. What do? You just sit there, and drive in your car for hours and hours. It became like a fidgety thing. There was no telephones, no nothing to watch. So it was like I puffed on them like cigars because just bored sitting in your car for 5 hours, every day and all that. So. But then the kids got on my butt, so I quit smoking.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the cons are a lot of fun. You get to do them very often.
Uh, I mean, sometimes the last year and a half, a lot of them shut down because of the COVID crap.
Yeah.
But now things are starting to open up. Uh, I might be. I don't know when I'm doing the next convention, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they got a couple going, but you got so many guys, and a lot of them, God bless them, but they need money.
Hmm.
So they'll go there for basically nothing, just to what they sell and whatever. But my deal's different. I say, look, I want so much money. You pay for the ticket to the room. Give me so much money, so I know what I'm making. Because I really don't need the money. For $500, I'm staying home. And I'll go there, but I'll tell the promoter. I said, look, okay, I got my payday, and you sell anything you want, whatever you sell, autographs, 8x10s, selfies. You keep all the money you bring in because I got my money.
Hmm.
So some promoters will work with that, and then others, say, "Oh, gee, the other guy just wants 500." I said, "Well, then book him. I'm staying home." But then you got some, and I'm pretty fair. I want them to make money too.
Yeah.
You got some guys out there that either they're really hurting or just kind of like a-holes because they want $20,000 to show up for 2 days or 8, 9 times. Yeah, I mean they want way too much money than what they're worth.
Hmm.
But so I try to be fair with people and let them keep money from all the gimmicks, but at least I'll know what I make. And I enjoy meeting the fans. You get out of the house once in a while, go do something. Meeting the fans is fun, makes you feel good. And I like meeting them and see the energy in their face. So it's a fun thing. I just don't do it super cheap, but I don't charge a lot either. So it works out good for everybody.
Did you ever do any of the cons with Bruno when he was around? Because I know Bruno would always have a lineup.
Yeah, I mean, there might have been a couple, but I don't remember many. I think Bruno was about out of it when I was doing it. 'Cause I was still wrestling and really didn't start doing conventions till after WCW,
Hmm.
and all that. And Bruno was already, I think, pretty much done.
Yeah. Toughest guy
Is this
ever.
your last question?
This is my last question. Now, some
Okay.
people, some people say it's Harley Race, but who's the toughest guy in wrestling?
The toughest guy in wrestling.
Like from your era?
Oh my God. Let me think. I mean, we are talking about two different things. You got guys in the business like Billy Robinson and Carl Gotch and John Foley, the guy who taught Gotch, and some other old names. You can go back to Jack Terry's and back to the 1900s, Stephen Stanislaus. They were wrestlers. And it was actually, Egyptians were big into wrestling. It was actually the Romans that turned wrestling into a deadly art. So you had guys that weren't tough guys in terms of punching and kicking, but yeah, I mean, Harley Race wasn't, and he was a tough guy, but he wasn't a Carl Gotch or a Billy or some other guys. I mean, and Harley would have got killed. But there were guys out there that were a different kind of breed with a different kind of training. I mean, when you watch the Ultimate Fight when it first started with the Gracies, what's his name would lay on his back the whole time, basically. Because the old school wrestlers, they wanted the guy to take you down. They, leave themselves open or sugarfoot you. And when you dove in to get them, that's what they wanted you to do. They wanted you to come down with them on the mat. Because on the way down, they were hooking you. When you hit the mat, pop, there goes your shoulder, your elbow's broke. If you know what you're doing, it's easy. So, yeah, it is probably the toughest guys are guys we don't know about, really.
Well, you know what, Larry, it was wonderful having you come on here today. I hope it was good for you, and I'll hook you up with Scotty McCoy. You want me to give him your all your information?
Yeah, give him the email. Just tell him to send me his phone number because I'm not a good computer guy, but I'll call him
Yeah.
and we'll see what the deal is.
Scotty will treat you well. He'll treat you
Oh, thank you,
well.
Greg. I
Yeah.
appreciate it, brother.
I loved having you on here. This was such an honor. I messaged my uncle on Facebook last night and told him I was going to have you on, and because he was one of the people that I used to watch wrestling with. And I said, "Do you remember Larry Zbyszko?" And he says, "Sure do."
Oh, God bless him. Good unk.
Yes, absolutely. Before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Go ahead. What
Yeah,
do I say?
just state your name and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
All right. I thought. This is Larry Zbyszko, wrestling's living legend, and you're listening to the Greg Gilbert Python something or other.
Paradise.
Fuck, I forgot to.
You want to try her again?
Python Paradise. Okay. So what am I saying? You're listening to, or
Yeah, listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise, because this will eventually even air at the station. That's okay. Roddy's daughter took her like 5 times.
okay, Python Paradise. That's a new one.
Yep.
Greg Gilbert.
Yep.
This is Larry Zbyszko, pro wrestling's living legend, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python Paradise.
Absolutely. And we hope to catch Larry at one of the cons. Thank you so much, Larry Zbyszko, for allowing me the honor of chatting with you. This truly, truly, I feel like I'm talking to wrestling royalty here.
Well, thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
Yep, and thank you definitely for that Shea match. Boy, oh boy, do I that was spectacular.
That was that made my career too, brother. Thank you, but thank you, and thank you all the fans. I hope we all live happily ever after, and all your dreams come true too. So.
Well, God bless you.
All the
I will
best.
email you the link when this is ready, and you can put it up wherever you want to.
I don't know what to do with a link. I'm not a computer guy.
You don't have a web page or anything like that?
No, I don't do anything. Email and I'll play poker on it, but that's about it.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Well, God bless you. You enjoy your day. And again, thank you, Angelo DeCipio, for setting this up.
All right, Dick. Well, have a good one, buddy. And I'll talk to you all someday soon, somewhere.
Absolutely. Take care. God bless.
You too, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.